in the interest of time. My name is Christine.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, it's 11:02, so I think we'll get started. Thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Christina Simeone. I'm with the Penn Future Energy Center. I'm joined today by Marilyn Begall of Be Green Consulting, who is a former employee of the Department of General Services Energy Management Office. I'm also joined today by Evan Andres, who is project coordinator at Penn Future. Today we're going to be talking about PennSave 101, the basics of performance contracting, focusing on opportunities and challenges of energy savings performance contracting. So first, I just want to talk about what is PennSave. PennSave is a coalition effort between Penn Future, a 501c3 environmental advocacy organization, the Pennsylvania chapter of the Energy Services Coalition, also a nonprofit organization, and the Pennsylvania Energy Partnership, which is a collection of local development districts that focus on energy management and technical assistance. The PennSave project aims to develop a statewide education and outreach program on energy savings performance contracts. This education approach is staged in 101, 201, and 301 levels. Today is a 101 webinar, so we're going to be talking about very basic and general themes about performance contracting. PennSave is also developing sample procurement documents and easy-to-understand educational materials that will focus on consumer education and protection in order to promote high-quality performance contracting in Pennsylvania. The goals of today's presentation are to become familiar with PennSave and its resources, understand the basic structure of performance contracting, and become familiar with the 5 steps of a performance contract. Also to learn about typical challenges and opportunities with performance contracting, and to begin to identify if performance contracts are a good fit for your facility. So the PennSave project, you may ask, why now? Why are we getting this off the ground now? Well, the first thing is the elimination of the Pennsylvania Department of General Services Energy Management Office, which used to facilitate performance contracts by developing a pre-qualified list of energy service company contractors. They also performed educational outreach, marketing, and technical assistance to government units, including school districts and municipalities. That program is no longer operating, and it's unclear what the future of that program will be. In addition, performance contracts have been around for a long time, but they're still poorly understood by some potential users. And also state funding cuts to school districts, municipalities, and other government units may now make performance contracting even more attractive. In Pennsylvania, the authorizing statute that allows government units to enter into these contracts is the Pennsylvania Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, or the GESA Act. This Pennsylvania law allows government units like school districts and municipalities to enter into long-term contracts of 5 to 20 years with energy service companies for energy-saving facility projects. The facility upgrades are financed through energy savings that are achieved over the term of the contract. And even though the Pennsylvania Department of General Services no longer has an office dedicated to facilitating these contracts, school districts and municipalities and other entities can still enter into these performance contracts. So why may you want to have a performance contract? Well, maybe your facility has energy-related or other capital needs. Energy needs such as you may need lighting upgrades or HVAC upgrades. Maybe you need a new roof or asbestos removal or rewiring. And perhaps your facility doesn't have the upfront capital to pay for these improvements or can't issue new debt to pay for the improvements. In addition, you may want the added security of having a guarantee that is going to, you may want the added security of a guarantee that the cost of the project will be recovered. And these are all things that performance contracts can help provide for you. So how does a performance contract work? And these are just very general terms, so I'm just trying to relay the basic mechanism. So the basic principle is that an energy savings upgrade, for example, HVAC replacement, lighting replacements, boiler replacements, will reduce projected energy and maintenance costs, therefore freeing up capital to pay off debt and reduce overall facility costs. So in this sense, your first bar here, and I'm just going to bring up this little tool, the blue bar here is your project before the performance contract. The blue is your energy use, the red is your maintenance costs. One example could be after the project upgrades are installed, your energy use is reduced, your maintenance costs are reduced, and then the remainder of the difference between your projected energy use and your actual energy use can be used to repay the debt to finance the project upgrades. Another way to structure a contract would be to have your energy use and maintenance costs reduce enough to pay back the debt repayment, and also have some additional energy savings so that your overall budgets are reduced. At the end of the project, you can see your energy use will still be reduced, your maintenance costs will still be reduced, and there's a large delta between your original projected energy use and what it is now post-project implementation, and that is captured savings for the customer. So let me just go to the next slide. Some of the energy conservation measures that can be installed have different payback periods. Some short-term payback periods are lighting retrofits and controls, heat recovery systems, HVAC controls. Some of the larger payback items are boiler replacement, new windows and doors, insulation or roofing replacement. So these are all things to consider as you think about what your facility needs and what you want in your project. But the basic question still remains, well, what the heck is a performance contract? Performance contracts are not magic. These are business transactions. They've been used successfully for decades by federal, state, local governments, and also in the private sector. Performance contracts are a contract for full project services, where the customer contracts with the energy service company for energy-related design, installation, and other services. The ESCO provides these services and also a guarantee that the energy savings needed to cover the debt repayment can be achieved. The customer also contracts with a lender for upfront capital if this is something that's needed if the customer is not going to self-finance. Customers need to remember that performance contracts have opportunities and risks for all parties, and we'll go into that with this next slide. As you can see, here's your contract, and there's multiple contracts, and this is just a graphic for visual representation. The three parties to a performance contract include the facility, the ESCO, who's the service provider, and the lender. For the facility or the customer, the opportunity is that you can get energy and capital upgrades for the facility that can be financeable. You get a guarantee of energy savings, and you have access to high quality expertise. The risk is that if the customer fails to follow the contract provisions, the energy guarantee can be voided. It's also a complicated contractual process that some customers don't understand, and this can create some uncertainty for the customer. And also, long-term contracts make tracking performance difficult at times. For the ESCO, the service provider, the opportunity is they can generate revenue and profits based on the core competencies of their organization. They can generate new business through good performance and recommendations. But on the other hand, there's a long and expensive sales cycle for these companies. They also bear the risk of equipment or systems underperforming and having to pay that energy guarantee or that savings guarantee. For the lender, the opportunities are they can have a reasonable rate of return for their capital and a relatively low risk because of that financial guarantee and the fact that energy efficiency has good track record of performance. The risk is that they have to do a good job ensuring that they can be profitable through their projections, and they also want to be able to avoid the customer refinancing with another provider. That's a risk that the lender bears. The bottom line here is that all parties must perform. This is not a magic relationship. This is something where each party has risks and opportunities and need to be diligent. So I'd just like to take a quick pause for questions before we go into the next set, which is going to be about the performance contracting process itself. And Evan is going to unmute presenters if they like to indicate.
I actually, for the sake of efficiency, we probably want to use the questions pane.
Oh,
on
wonderful.
on your sidebar there. You can type questions throughout the presentation, and then we'll gather them up. We don't have any questions right now, but let me just make sure.
Thank you for that clarification, Evan. So I'll just move, seeing that there's no questions, I'll just move to the next section, which is
Christina, we do have one question, and
great.
it is, has the state GISA process been resolved?
To my knowledge, it has not been resolved. I know that they were taking some steps to develop their process, but I don't think anything has, been no guidance to this point that has been provided. Marilyn, do you have any other additional information?
No, I don't. I know that they had released I know of one project that they released under the new process, but I have not heard any development, and I have seen nothing on paper as far as process is concerned.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions?
There are not.
All right, so moving on, what is the performance contract process? There's 5 basic steps, and again, we're talking in generalities, so this could potentially change, but in general, there are 5 basic steps which go from evaluating if performance contracting is the right choice for your facility, selecting a service provider, contracting for services, constructing the project, and then verifying savings. For step 1, evaluating if performance contracting is right for you, the goal of this step is to understand if your facility has the technical and decision-making components needed to deliver a successful project. Some milestones here are you want to gather energy use data and other technical information about the facility and assess if you have the internal decision-making structure to enable a performance contract to work. Some of the resources that PennSave has available to help you through this process is our Good Candidate 101, 201, and 301 forms, for which the 101 survey is going to be given at the end of today's presentation. We also have information about third-party facilitators who can help you navigate the data collection and internal decision-making structure process. Also some resources about free or low-cost data collection and decision-making structure recommendations. For step 2, selecting a service provider, the goal is to identify a qualified ESCO interested in bidding in your project. The customer should note that no financial commitment is made until the customer gets to step 3. However, at step 2, ESCOs incur significant costs to respond to your proposal. So you want to make sure you're seriously considering performance contracts before moving through step 2. In step 2, the milestones are developing an internal decision-making team, identifying a qualified ESCO through a request for qualification, securing decision-maker approval to issue a request for proposal, and then issuing that request for proposal to qualified ESCOs. You should also note that the RFP and RFQ processes can be combined into one to save time for the customer and the ESCO. There are various ways of doing it, but the bottom line is you want to make sure the ESCO is qualified, and then you also want to make sure that you get various proposals on the design of your project. So some resources that PennSave has or is developing to help the customer out includes sample RFQ and RFP documents with guidance and scoring criteria, guidance on decision-maker team development, and a distribution list online in our Opportunity Center of the PennSave.org website to help customers and ESCOs so they can advertise different opportunities. And we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation. One note about flexibility on procurement approach. The size and complexity of your project will impact your procurement strategy. ESCOs spend a great deal of time and money on proposals with no guarantee of contract, and ESCOs need to scale their internal proposal development resources to fit each project. So as projects increase in dollar value and complexity, the client has more ability or leeway to ask for additional questions, require more information. If the client has a smaller value project, they're likely going to need to scale back their procurement approach in order to remain economically feasible for the ESCO. So for example, the client could require core qualification information and limit their cost or project design information that they ask at the proposal stage to a sample set of energy conservation measures. And again, the customer wants to think about this because they want to make sure the ESCOs will be interested in bidding on their project. So it's just something to keep in mind, that type of flexibility and understanding your project and tailoring your procurement to the project size and complexity. For step 3, contracting for services, the goal of this step is to execute various contracts for performance services with a qualified ESCO that delivers the best value for you. You have to understand that by entering into an investment grade audit, the customer is making a financial commitment, so that even if the final performance contract is not signed, the customer is still going to be responsible for the cost of that investment grade audit. The milestones of this step include an investment grade audit contract with the ESCO. The audit will establish baseline energy use of the facility and identify energy savings opportunities. Entering into an actual contract for services that includes a final scope of work and cost, and a financing agreement with the lender which covers the terms of the financial obligation between the customer and the lender. Some of the resources PennSave provides or is in the process of providing for this step to help customers is a sample IGA agreement and scoring criteria, educational materials on financing options, guidance on contracting agreement process, and third-party facilitator resources and funding options. The 4th step is the construction of the project. The goal is the project construction is completed in a coordinated manner while minimizing financial risk to all parties. The milestones here are specific construction milestones that are set in the performance contract agreement and scope of work, and that all of these construction milestones are met on time, and that the customer appoints a construction project liaison to work with the ESCO throughout the construction phase. PennSave has some 201 guidance on the construction phase that may be helpful to customers. For step 5, it's verification of project performance. The goal being to ensure the project is saving energy as planned by employing cost-effective and ongoing verification initiatives. Here, rather than specific milestones, it's important that the customer understand the energy-saving measurement and verification options and all of these associated costs, and that they select the best measurement and verification service for the project budget and understand how the project is performing over time. PennSave has 201 guidance on M&V and also on step 5, and also 201 guidance on M&V options themselves that are available. I'm just going to take a quick pause for questions before we go into the next section, which is talking about financing, the energy guarantee, and typical performance contract challenges.
Yeah.
And just a reminder to use the question box.
And Christina, we have 2 questions that are carryovers probably from the last time, but give people maybe a little bit of time to type their questions in. So the first question is, besides the 20-year maximum contract, what are some of the other minimum requirements of the contract to meet the legislative intent? So that would have been back to the GISA question, I believe.
Marilyn, you want to take that?
I don't know if there's any minimal requirements. One of the requirements that is stated in the original GISA Act, but could be changed, was that the savings for each year had to cover the payments for that year. In other words, you can't have an accumulative savings that will cover the payments over the period of the contract. You should have that savings per year per payment, so that your budget each year covers that repayment from the savings. And trying to think of other minimum requirements, and I don't know if that goes back to size or of project. There are none. The only thing is that you have to really think about your credit availability and pick the best financial option for yourself.
And from the customer's perspective also, an ESCO company that has done business in Pennsylvania should be very versed on the statutory requirements of these contracts when operating in Pennsylvania. So that's a question that a customer should be able to ask of the ESCO, and the ESCO should be able to easily provide that information if customers have concerns there. But all of the ESCOs that have operated in Pennsylvania successfully should be able to provide guidance to the customer on that specific point.
So the second question that we have is, how frequently do ESCO's partners with conservation service providers perform energy audits or retrocommissioning prior to the ECM implementations? I'm happy to repeat that.
Marilyn, I'm gonna put that over to you as well.
I know it's done, and I know that pre-audits are sometimes irregular. In some states, they have to be done under their energy performance contracting laws. So it can be done. Sometimes if there is a pre-audit, then the IGA is less complicated. They know right away what's there, what options you would have for energy conservation measures. So they do it, but that IGA is the one that when you procure an ESCO, that IGA is going to give you your options for ECMs. But a pre-audit will also give you a great idea of whether a project is feasible or not. So it can be done, and do they partner? I would imagine that some do. I would imagine some do it themselves. So there's a lot of diversity out there as far as company coordination.
And that's a great point, Marilyn. For potential customers that are on the webinar, I just want to make sure that they understand some of the acronyms that are being used. CSPs are conservation service providers, and these are entities that provide energy efficiency services. I think the point that Marilyn was made, the second point that Marilyn was making about how different companies operate, there's such a wide with performance contracting, there's so many different permutations of how contracts can be structured, how work can be subcontracted on the back end, how there's partnerships on the front end. So customers have to realize that there is a lot of flexibility, and that flexibility, in putting together these relationships can provide. Again, there's risks and opportunities with all of that flexibility. And it's incumbent upon the customer to really understand what those risks and benefits are. There's no way for PennSave as an educational initiative to be able to provide the customer with information about every potential relationship or contract structuring. There's just too many of them. But if you understand the basics and understand how where the typical pitfalls are and what the best practices are, it will help customers navigate this process with less anxiety. Evan, are there any other questions?
No, we can move on.
Great, thank you. All right, so on to financing. Basic ways to finance a project include operating expenditure financing, general obligation debt financing, and also incorporation of external funds. Operating expenditure financing is typically done through a tax-exempt lease that allows tax-exempt customers like school districts and municipalities to finance a project with a portion of their utility service budgets. Those utility service budgets money would be freed up in those utility service budgets after the energy conservation measures are installed and your energy use goes down. Going back to that chart we showed earlier, that delta or that change that has been created through reduced energy and maintenance costs now provides a funding stream to pay back debt service. Should note that these lease payments or those utility budgets are still subject to annual appropriations, which customers need to be aware of. General obligation debt financing is like traditional debt financing. For example, a municipality issues a bond or takes out a traditional bank loan to pay for these services. External funds could include grant funding or utilizing utility rebates such as through Pennsylvania's Act 129, which is the energy efficiency requirement on electric distribution companies. There are also subsidized bonds like qualified energy conservation bonds or electricity grid services through the PJM, which is our electricity grid in this area. There's energy efficiency and demand response programs. These are services that conservation service providers typically provide. ESCOs can arrange relationships with the conservation service providers, or some ESCOs may actually be able to provide the services themselves. It really depends on the client's needs and the ESCO's preferred approach. Some things to understand about financing. The customer needs to understand itself and understand its options. So potential performance contracting customers should understand their creditworthiness and funding limitations early on in the process. Before issuing procurement documents for services, the customer should understand any potential roadblocks to financing. When selecting a financing agent, they want to look for somebody who has experience with these types of energy projects, has adequate capital resources, has done business in Pennsylvania and knows applicable laws and statutes, and has a track record of successful performance. The financing agent should also have the adequate human capital and staffing resources to be responsive to your needs. A word about the energy guarantee. What is the energy guarantee? Well, the ESCO provides a guarantee to the customer that the project will generate enough energy savings to cover the cost of servicing the customer's debt. This energy guarantee is very important because it gives customers security of knowing that they're going to be able to recoup their investment, thus reducing their risk. It also reduces risk for the lender. However, it's very important to read the fine print. The final contract agreement between the ESCO and the customer identifies the terms of the guarantee. If the customer fails to fulfill its contractual obligations or deviates from the use patterns in the contract, the ESCO has the right to void that all or a portion of that guarantee, depending on the contract. So it's very important to remember that all parties must perform. Some typical challenges of a performance contract could include, as we were talking about, the customer fails to perform its contractual obligations, leading to the void of the energy savings guarantee. Another typical challenge is the customer may not understand the technical and assumptions that impact core project economics. For example, the ESCO makes certain assumptions about projected energy prices and how those energy prices may increase or decrease in the future, thus impacting the potential energy savings of the project. this is forecasting in the future and nobody has a crystal ball, so the assumptions really matter. It's important to understand what are the right numbers or the most reasonable numbers, and that's something that the customer doesn't always understand or take into account. Some sample customer roles and responsibilities here include, on the customer side, clearly communicating to the ESCO what the project priorities, goals, and special needs may be. On the ESCO side, the ESCO needs to educate the customer about sensible project design and limitations, so that if the customer has its priorities and goals, the ESCO needs to try to meet those priorities and goals, but in a way that's reasonable and effective for both parties. The customer is also responsible for developing that decision-making team that not only has the skills but also the authority to review and approve performance contracts. The ESCO needs to develop a proposal that meets the needs of the customer at costs that are going to be within close range of the final cost estimates in the investment grade audit. So these are all just some sample roles and responsibilities, and we do have a document that identifies more of these roles and responsibilities for the ESCO and the customer. One way that customers can help minimize uncertainty about the performance contract process is to hire or retain a third-party facilitator. These third-party facilitators can help navigate the performance contract both on the administrative side to help manage the process, and also on the technical side to help inform and review key project assumptions about energy price forecast, the design of the project, measurement and verification, and other criteria. Third-party facilitators can also do some combination of administrative and technical services. The cost of the third-party facilitator can be incorporated into a performance contract, but again, just like the IGA, those costs can only be incorporated into the performance contract if a final agreement is signed. Customers are going to need to understand and determine if they can pay the facilitator out of pocket in the event that a final performance contract is not finalized. PennSave does have some resources to help identify qualified facilitators and provide customers with some guidance on fee structure options and other criteria. So I'm going to pause again for some questions before we go into the Good Candidate 101 survey, which helps customers identify if performance contracting might be right for them. Are there any questions at this point?
Christina, we don't have any questions right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Evan. So we'll go right into the survey questions. These are 6 basic questions, again, at the 101 level, very basic. Yes or no questions to help customers start to get an understanding of performance contracting might be a good fit for them. So some background to the first 2 questions. In order to develop a viable performance contract, you must have the potential for energy savings at your facility. For example, old energy use equipment or inefficient operations, perhaps deferred maintenance, or a compelling non-energy capital need like old electrical wiring or failing infrastructure. So the first question, yes or no, does your facility have old energy using equipment, issues associated with deferred maintenance, and or a compelling capital need? Second question, yes or no, is your total annual utility budget at least $450,000? Now, smaller projects can be financed with lower utility budgets of $250,000, and some ESCOs may have different thresholds here, but customers should understand that these are the basic ballpark numbers that we're working with for more traditional size projects and maybe smaller projects. Again, just a reminder what we were talking about procurement flexibility, depending on project size and complexity. If your project might be along the categories of a smaller value project, you may have to have a little bit more flexibility on your procurement, the robustness of the questions and complexity of your procurement strategy in order to deliver a proposal that will be economically feasible for ESCOs to bid on. So just another reminder there. All right, second set of questions, Part B. From start to finish, the performance contracting process can be lengthy. To facilitate the process, decision makers need to be educated on performance contracting, and a decision-making structure needs to be established. So first question of Part B, yes or no? Do decision makers at your facility understand performance contracting? Now, if you answer no, there is the opportunity to provide education so that your decision makers can understand performance contracting, but it's important to understand baseline. If there's little or no support or understanding or no willingness to be educated, then that's going to be a hard hurdle to jump over. If it's just a matter of providing more education, there's interest in the process, and decision makers are willing to learn, then that's something that can be overcome. Second question of Part B, yes or no? Does your facility have a structure in place for decision making? Again, this is very important to make sure that the performance contract process moves along. Part C, energy savings performance contract projects require the facility to identify a point person or a champion to facilitate the contracting process, for example, collecting data or leading facility tours. Yes or no? Does your facility have a point person available? Very, very important aspect here. Part D, performance contracts require ownership of the facility and facility use to remain the same for the foreseeable future. Yes or no? To the best of your knowledge, is your facility's ownership and use expected to remain the same? For example, if you're entering into a 10-year procurement or performance contract and you have a project that's structured to reduce, to provide energy savings and a guarantee those energy savings associated with a specific use of your facility, and all of a sudden, 5 years in, the facility is sold, or the facility now, instead of serving, providing services 12 hours a day, is now providing services for 24 hours a day. That could present some challenges. There's always the opportunity to talk to the ESCO and to figure out how to deal with these changes, but up front it's good to understand if there are any expected changes to ownership or use before entering into these contracts. So if you answered yes to 4 or more of these questions, performance contracting might be a good choice for you. And what we would recommend is that you plan on attending one of our in-person performance contracting 201 workshops. This is, again, a greater level of detail about performance contracting. It would be a day-long workshop that we hope to have in the first quarter of next year. We encourage you to sign up on the customer list of the PennSave.org website in order to be notified about our 201 workshop. If you answered yes to less than 4 of these questions, performance contracting might not be a good fit for you. However, we encourage you to share your results with us at info@PennSave so we can help discuss your options, because there may be ways to ameliorate some of the concerns. I just wanted to show people the PennSave website. Again, there's a customer list where you can provide information to sign up. There's also our service provider list. This will facilitate communications with these 2 different groups, and we have an opportunity center so that once we get some municipalities, or if there are any entities who want to advertise their opportunities, we can put it up on the Opportunity Center and send out emails to our service provider list alerting them that these opportunities exist. We have on the PennSave site a little bit about our 3-step approach, and we'll soon have information on our third-party facilitator documents. We have our education materials as well as the pre-recorded 101 webinar that was done on November 4th. These can all be downloaded Again, we have the 101 curriculum, some 201 educational curriculum, and some 301 documents, as well as some procurement documents, many of which are still in the development stages. We also have some events and resources that are available, and more of this is coming very soon. We have some new facility data collection information that we'll be posting shortly, as well as a glossary of terms that customers can use, because there's so many acronyms when talking about performance contracting. So we just wanted to make people aware of this resource. So before we end, we should open this up to questions. Again, this webinar is going to be recorded and is going to be available at the PennSave.org website, and you can also contact us at info@PennSave.org with any questions you may have. So, are there any questions now from the audience?
This is related to an earlier question, but who typically performs the IGA, the ESCO in-house or a subcontracted third-party CSP?
I believe it would depend on the ESCO. I believe some ESCOs would do it in-house and some may contract. Marilyn, is that your understanding as well?
If you are procuring, and when you go into the IGA, you are signing a contract with the ESCO. And what you're buying is a project. They may have some subcontractors come in, but the ESCO may bring in engineers, but the ESCO is who performs the IGA. The people you deal with and sign the contract with are the ones that will perform. They will maybe hire expertise as needed, but your contract is with them. It's a one contract deal. You're buying a project rather than multiple subcontractors. If a ESCO needs a subcontract, they will hire a subcontractor, but typically the ESCO itself does the IGA.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Marilyn. Are there any other questions?
I have no other questions right now.
Wonderful. Well, we thank you very much for being a part of our webinar, and we look forward to engaging with customers and performance contracting companies and others to expand our education efforts in 2014 and encourage any input to be sent to info@PennSave.org, and love you to visit our site and take a look at the materials as needed. So thank you to Marilyn Begal and Evan Andres for being on today's webinar, and have a wonderful holiday, everybody.